Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my musings about economization in science and of science itself. I entitled this The Change of the Game, and I would like to gratefully acknowledge collaboration with Franz Schultheis of the University of St. Gallen and Manuel Trachtenberg from Jerusalem. Part of this has been already published in a script of the Swiss Science and Innovation Council and can be downloaded on the either homepage. So what is it all about? This little slide shows you a diagram, what I called some years ago the public life of scientific facts. And it shows how a new finding, a novelty from the lab, makes its way to the inclusion into a general scientific system. The red triangles indicate where we meet economical drivers in this system. This is definitely in the patents, this is trivial, but this is also in the political institutions, this is in the granting organizations, this is in internal reviewing, and in all the conferences and publication in scientific journals. I will come to that in a minute. So that has to do with a phenomenon that Caulfield and Condit in a 2012 paper named the cumulative forces of hype. And what you see is that it is a mixture of publication pressure, commercialization and translation pressure, so to come up with startup companies, institutional press releases, media, public interest, and so on, up to the scientific bandwagon if you want to establish a new field. Let's come to the facts. So what Trachtenberg calls a massification of the scientific enterprise. What we see at the moment is roughly 6 million researchers worldwide, which is 1 in 1,000 of the world population. This seems to be not too much, but remember, 1 of 1,000 citizens is a researcher, and this does publications. So we have 1 million new researchers in the developing countries in the last decade. All these people produce 1 million, all rough numbers, 1 million papers per year. As you, your own experience will tell you, for the acceptance of one paper, you have to decline roughly or reject roughly 3 others. So what that means is that for 1 million papers per year, 3 million papers have to be rejected. Of this, in some 4 million papers, we need minimum 2 reviews each, which means that the 6 million researchers have at minimum to write 8 million reviews per year just to keep up the publication machine. Now consider that 50% of these papers are never cited, more than 50%. This is a very conservative numbers. So this adds up to roughly 50 million papers in total since the famous Baroque times when we founded all these scientific communities, so for example the Royal Society. Since then, science commercialization has exploded into 25,000 peer-reviewed journals, which is steadily increasing, and we see at the moment, as to be measured in Webometrics, the numbers from yesterday, 22,100 universities that do academic education and research. So these are the numbers. Now, what are the causalities and what are the relationships to the academic practice? Here again you see the increasing numbers, both in the increase of papers as in the increase of academic research, steadily increasing numbers, and here extremely increasing numbers, 16th, 17th, 18th century up to 2009. One problem in this extreme competition of 25,000 journals, 6 million 6 million of researchers and 1 million papers per year, and counting the papers as a reference for productivity and for the personal careers. One problem is that we see an increasing number of we would call toxic papers. What is a toxic paper? A toxic paper contains fraud, honest errors, and normally should be detected by the peer review system, but very often is retracted after publication. The upper left panel shows you an interview that was done in 2009 by Fanelli and collaborators, where they asked scientists about their willingness to fabricate data to get a paper into a good journal. And they willingly admitted, 2%, roughly 2% willingly admitted that they already had fabricated, falsified or modified data or result, and nearly 1/3 admitted that they had questionable, whatever this means, questionable research practices. So this is due to the publication frequency. That means the number of papers that is needed for the next academic qualification, be it a PhD, be it a habilitation, the old German-speaking system, be it to become a professor, a full professor, an assistant professor, or getting tenure at some university. That's also the pressure to be in the round of a proper publication at the real time point. For example, at the end of the PhD, or just before being awarded a prize, or just before being awarded a tenure position. Then you have to publish in a high competitive field if you, depending on different disciplines, for example, do crystal structures, then you have to come up with a paper that contains a novelty earlier than the competitors. Or if you have commercial interests, if you have your own company, if you are associated to a company, if you want to have a startup company, and so on and so on. So this all sums up to retraction processes. And this is a very recent, October 2014, very recent essay or the editorial in Nature that Nature saw in the last 2 years 7 papers that were affected by fraud or honest error and had to be retracted, which is a huge number for this prestigious journal. Here you see a summary of the New York Times, little statistics from 2000 to 2009, and you see the steep increase of papers that are going to be retracted. So, retraction challenges, and here again, the last 13 retractions of research papers from Nature, those that happened in 2013 and so far in 2013, certainly involve cases of honest error and commendable conduct, but they also involved 6 cases in which there was fraud. Honest conduct means that you have a correction to your research after publication, so that you did not know before. Then at least the peer review should have detected that something might be wrong or over-exaggerated or something. But for certain reason, the peer review obviously is not so efficient in these cases. And the other problem is real fraud. And this was 6 cases in 2013 and 2014 just in Nature. There's a very nice homepage, website that goes after that. And this is called retractionwatch.com, which lists all the cases, the context and the circumstances under which such retractions occur. So the question is now, from this very short example in the relationship to economic behavior, does the escalation of science costs kill the system, or are we the other way around? Are we able to maintain the system if this over-exaggerates with the cost? So we have to look in what is really the pressure, precious things in in the career of an academic, and this is definitely time and attention. This is a quote from Georg Frank from Vienna, who wrote the book on the economy of attention, and he says that scientific information is measured in terms of the attention it earns. That's the today situation since some decades. Since scientists demand scientific information as means of production, the attention that the theory attracts is the measure of its value as a capital good. So here we have the relation of economy and production and writing papers. On the other hand, the attention a scientist earns for himself is capitalized into the asset called reputation. And this is the other capitalization, that the personal reputation of being a famous scientist is immediately related to the output, to the production, and to the attention that you get in your scientific community. So time and attention for being or becoming a successful researcher means you have quite a bit of competition in between students for credit, for lab space, for PhD positions, for postdoc position, within the group of the teachers, for the disciplinarity, very often resulting in a complete monodisciplinarity in teaching, in the institutions to get the best students, and among the nations to keep the best students and to avoid a brain drain. These similar things are true for being a successful researcher, where you have a competition among institutions that try to get the best faculty and keep the best faculty, and the nations, again, to keep the best faculty and to get the best faculty. And so it has become a question of national interest in the meantime, because everything with time, attention, and the best science that requires a lot of time and gives a lot of attention is related to the gross-national product of a nation. By the way, a hard causal relationship that I have never been able to detect in the scientific literature. So whether this is a correlation or simple an assumption or rumor, I cannot tell you. Time and attention are scarce, and this scarcity raises all kinds of rating and ranking. It's very clear that time and attention can be made objective by the number of publications, by the hours spent, and so you have an output of numbers, and this enables you to rate and to rank also the persons and to relate the rating and ranking, because it's time and attention, quotation or citation index, to the individual reputation of the scientist. This ends up in higher wages for talents, in efficiency thinking, so we all adopt an economical habitus, in acceleration of the research, and finally into accountability. That means evaluation processes by quantification with a feedback loop make time and attention even more scarce. So the question then is the number of talents, of real talents, growing in an analogous manner as the number of peer-reviewed papers, journals, and patents? Obviously not, otherwise they were not scarce. So the question now then is, what is the competition good for? And my hypothesis is competition is only good for private goods, not for the public and common goods. And the other hypothesis is knowledge is a public and common good, so we should avoid competition in that manner that we are going to develop at the moment. So what we see is a game change, and the question is the knowledge production going to be shifted into the private sector? If so, then what we observe in economization is explainable. Then it means fighting for talents among institutions and nations is moving the food, which means brains follow the money. Question of infrastructure and the richness. Fighting for credits is that the students grab for low-hanging fruits, minimization of the efforts, highest efficiency for getting the highest number of credits in the shortest times. Credit-driven instead of interest-driven. Fighting for impact means publish as much as possible with highly renowned people in a field with high attention, again, impact-driven instead of interest-driven, and fighting for time could mean don't reflect but produce and be efficient. This leads again, in the second perspective, to strange sponsoring effects within academic institutions. The most favored one, which all the granting institutions that I met around the world, is the so-called Matthew effect. Matthew 25:29, for unto everyone that has shall be given, and he shall have abundance, but from him that hath not shall be taken even that which he hath. Which means granting organization or funding always prefer the successful researchers. And the question is, what are the successful researchers? The successful researchers are those with the highest reputation and the highest attention, which means in the logic that we have developed, the highest citation index or the highest number of papers. This is then why the equality of disciplines is lost. So if you compare neuroscience with theoretical physics or with astronomy or with Catholic philosophy, then you will find a fundamental difference in the equality. This again has the threat of a potential withdrawal of the state. It may provoke an increased flat rate taxation and lead to reduced budget for education because of this efficiency striving, and related to the following utilitarianism that is related to this efficiency striving and the lost equality. So another threat is that additional money coming often reduces the scope for development. So instead of broadening your perspective here, if you are successful, if you get more money for the same type of research you do, then you simply lose the interest for the neighboring fields and for interdisciplinarity. So the question then is, how innovative can you be? Historically, it was quite the opposite. In the foundation papers of the first European university, Bologna, it was made clear that it was a clearance, independence from Papst, Pope and Emperor, from Papst and Kaiser. So you had to be independent from state support and from ideology and religion. And this was the most important success factor, the most important asset of this first university in 12th century. The other face of the medal is the danger that you use economical behavior to get reputation not by research, but just by knowing how the game works. And this is done in these two examples, both taken from Sience in 2011, where universities simply buy ranking places so that you can jump from somewhere in the 10,000s within 1 year or 2 years to the 200 to 300 bracket in the Shanghai ranking. And this is done again by traditional economical and accounting technologies. If you use an accounting program for measuring the efficiency of your scientists. Then you can ask the scientists with the highest reputation to spend the time at the other university, and you pay him, let's say, a honorary of 100,000, roughly $100,000 or $70,000 per year, and some business class flight. And the other part of the contract is that this scientist is then giving the second address of your university in all his publications. And that makes you simply jump from somewhere in the nowhere to a serious position in between 300 and 400 in these cases. So this is not only the case with the two universities quoted here, but this has been an infectious disease all around the world at the moment. The problem of moving the food means that you have a shift in the valuing of the disciplines. Moving the food means that scientists behave like cats. Cats cannot be educated, but to convince a cat to do something means you simply move the food, and then the cat will follow the food. And that is how the ironic perspective on the behavior of scientists is of today. I have already talked about this Scopus mentality of accounting measures for science, and these are the effects. If you move the food, you will go into an entrepreneur mentality, which means high productivity and efficiency, and you will be market-driven. This will end up in a flattening of your language with a high jargon efficiency, and that is what we already see today. Even within one discipline, people cannot talk anymore to each other in inorganic chemistry or in organic chemistry or in mathematics and psychiatry. And this also ends up in a highly, extremely fixated and formalized type of publication. And this has already been known since last century, the 80s in the last century, where Matziger and Mirkwood published a paper to protest against the passive voice, the style of publishing that started to become fashionable because of this efficiency and productivity-driven markets. And the funny thing is, Polly Matzinger is a very, very famous scientist in immunology, and Mirkwood is her Afghan dog. And nobody realized that in the paper these two authors little bit protested against the passive voice. It was a very hard science paper. Okay, so these things here are contra to the interdisciplinarity, to the development of a interdisciplinary setting, because too much time is needed to avoid jargon efficiency. You have to talk too much, you have to explain too much. So this jargon efficiency is created by this market-driven or productivity and efficiency means, and is counterintuitive to interdisciplinarity, and it leads to highly incremental proposals. So we have less innovation because all in the same mental state of a certain jargon, you will only have incremental ideas for proceeding with your research, together with the Matthäus effect that I showed you before. My hypothesis is that we are going to lack innovation, and we see this already. So the conclusion is we have exogenic forces, which is an academic and economic tsunami with much more than one to 1.5 million papers coming in the next year, which is still a steeply increasing number of journals. So that will lead to a complete budget-conscious leading of academic institution with a all or nothing game. So we will be run by numbers, very simply. And I think that we have to counteract with endogenic forces. We should strive for objectivity with a strict self-reflection, really ask ourselves permanently, why are we doing this experiment? What is the contribution of this experiment to the general knowledge? And is it justified to use money for that? Shouldn't I do something else? In the publication for the scientific community, the publication should be used as a quality measure, not as a quantity measure, a quality measure and a self-correction, and we should adhere definitely to a long-term, discrete and critical thinking and not to a short-term thinking that is output-oriented instead of outcome-oriented. So far my ideas on the relationship of economy and science and the future of the economization of science. Thank you very much for your attention.